She stood at the edge of the briefing room quiet, unnoticed, while the men spoke over maps, planning routes, assigning roles. No one asked her what she thought. No one cared that she'd already memorized the terrain better than half the team. She wasn't there to fight. She was the medic, but there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Frida Lundgren had been awake since 0400. Not because she had to be. Not because someone had yelled a command through the barracks. She was up because that's what discipline looked like when no one else was watching. That's what obsession looked like when it had nowhere else to go, at just 23. She looked almost out of place on a forward operating base deep in the Syrian desert. Blonde, petite, blue-eyed, she could have been mistaken for a lost civilian. Or maybe the daughter of one of the brass visiting for a photo op. But those who thought that had no idea who they were looking at. Frida wasn't just the medic. She was a storm waiting for permission, and no one was going to give it. The operators called her Doc, with a mix of affection and condescension, like she was their little sister with a stethoscope. Essential, but harmless. They appreciated her when bullets tore through flesh or when infections crept into wounds. They respected her calm during chaos, her skill with an IV, her encyclopedic knowledge of trauma. But when they spoke about war, about routes, ambushes, ballistics, she was invisible. She didn't fight that, not outwardly. Because what none of them knew was that while they spent their evenings lifting weights, playing cards, or joking about their next stop, Frida was alone in her quarters, poring over sniper manuals, ballistics charts, and combat simulations. Hidden beneath the standard medical texts she kept in view were dog-eared pages on marksmanship theory. Her father, a former Swedish Special Forces sniper, had trained her. Since she was 15, she'd won precision shooting competitions long before she'd worn any uniform. But here, she was told to heal, not to shoot. She'd asked once, early on, quietly, cautiously, would it be possible to observe tactical planning more closely? The look she got back from Commander Morrison was polite, but firm. Focus on your job, Doc. We've got the rest covered. So she stopped asking, but she didn't stop preparing. Each night, she'd go to the base range when no one else was. Watching, the range officer, Martinez, a retired ranger with a limp and a chip on his shoulder, had noticed her patterns. At first, he offered pointers on her sidearm. Then, one evening, without a word, he placed a long-range rifle in front of her. "You know what to do," he said. And she did. Night after night. She practiced. Breath, trigger, wind, time. But even as her skills grew, her place on the team didn't change. Briefings were the same. She sat near the wall while the operators gathered around the table. Missions were the same. She was assigned to the rear, tending the wounded, listening to the chaos through a headset but never stepping into it. And the hierarchy? That was set in stone. Commander Morrison's team of SEALs was elite, hardened, trusted. They'd bled together, survived ambushes, taken lives, and saved each other. They trusted Frida with a tourniquet, but trust with a weapon? That wasn't part of the picture. Not for someone like her. And maybe that would have been enough. Maybe Frida would have accepted that life. But then something happened. 3 weeks before everything changed, a mission required someone fluent. In Arabic, Frida had quietly mentioned to Staff Sergeant Chun Bulldog. They called him, that she spoke it fluently. He blinked at her like she'd told him she could breathe underwater. "That's great, Doc," he said, ruffling her hair. "But we need you focused on keeping us patched up. Let the spooks handle the talking." They deployed with a translator who misheard a key phrase and almost got 2 operators killed. Frida had heard the full radio transcript later. She never said a word. Then there was the sniper op last month. Their designated marksman, Williams, tore a ligament. Instead of checking within the unit, they borrowed someone from another SEAL team. Frida had practiced that exact scenario, studied the terrain. She could have hit every shot, but they never even thought to ask. None of this was done in cruelty. It wasn't malice. It was habit, structure, a rigid belief in roles and lanes, and boundaries that no one dared to cross. Frida's job was to stop bleeding, not prevent it, and so the pattern held until that one morning. In the dusty light of the Syrian sun, everything tilted. It was during a routine briefing another intel gathering mission, another convoy route to watch. Morrison outlined the plan with calm confidence. Frida stood in the back, noting casualty scenarios and escape paths. She saw a flaw in the overwatch angle, a sniper position too exposed. She made a mental note. She didn't mention it. What was the point? Later that day, while doing a quiet inventory of her medical bag, she overheard Chun talking to another SEAL. "You know," he said with a smirk, "Doc spends a lot of time at the range for someone who's just supposed to carry gauze and morphine." The other man laughed. "Yeah, always asking about optics and recoil patterns. Kinda weird, right?" It wasn't the words that froze Frida's blood. It was the tone. Curious, suspicious, as if all her quiet efforts, all her preparation, were about to be reframed as something dangerous. That week, she noticed it everywhere. Martinez grew distant. At the range, "Maybe you should stick to your field manuals for a bit," he mumbled. People are starting to notice. Conversations around her began to shift. Tactical chatter went quiet when she walked into the room. Her questions were met with polite nods and quick subject changes. Her requests for technical manuals were denied. Her range access? Limited. No explanation. Just silence. And then came the summons. Morrison's office. He sat across from her with a file spread between them. Her file. "There are concerns, Longren," he said, fingers drumming on the desk. "You've been studying weapon systems, tactical theory, things outside your role. I study them in my own time, sir. They help me understand battlefield dynamics. Help me prepare for—" "You're a medic," he interrupted. "I need medics, not wannabe operators." The room was quiet. Dust hung in the beam of sunlight coming through the blinds. Frida sat perfectly still, because movement would betray the emotion clawing at her throat. "I need to know you understand," Morrison said finally. "Your role is medical. Your focus stays medical. If this continues, I'll reassign you to a non-operational unit." He dismissed her with a nod. She walked out of the office with her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But something inside her changed. Not broken, not bitter. Clear. She would not ask again. She would not plead for permission to be more than what they thought she was. She would simply be ready. And when the day came, she was needed not for what she was told to be, but for everything they didn't know she was. She would answer. No questions, no hesitation. She would be ready, because that's what real preparation is. It isn't loud. It doesn't demand to be seen. It waits. And when the world needs it most, it acts. Why was her hand trembling? Not from fear, but from clarity. The moment the emergency alarm sounded across the base, Frida knew this wasn't routine. Alarms were drilled into the bones of every soldier. This one was different. The pitch, the duration, the chaos in the voices that followed over radio. Something had gone terribly wrong. She didn't hesitate. Her body moved before her thoughts caught up years of medical training and silent readiness unfolding into action. Clipboard dropped, boots pounding the dirt, eyes locked forward, inside the operations center. A dozen voices shouted at once. Maps glowed red under blinking satellite feeds. The observation post was dark. Overwatch had gone silent. A vital sniper nest watching a convoy route, a route being traveled in real time, had gone dark. The sniper team was pinned, their spotter injured, enemy movement was closing in, and no one had a solution. Not fast enough. Frida slipped into the SEAL's room unnoticed, or maybe just unacknowledged. The same way she always did, standing near the wall, medical bag in hand, invisible to tactical discussions unless someone started bleeding. Commander Morrison stood at the center like a man on fire, trying not to let the flame show. His voice cut through the din with command clarity. "Viper 6, this is base. Report your status. The response came broken and tense. Base. Viper 6. Barrett compromised. Williams down, under heavy fire. Cannot maintain position. Every operator's face tightened. Not panic. Worse, helplessness. They were watching a mission collapse in real time. Frida's eyes locked on the tactical screen. A blinking red beacon marked the sniper position, perched high above a desert ridge. Vulnerable from 3 angles, exactly as she'd suspected in that forgotten briefing 2 days ago. She knew that terrain. She'd studied it endlessly, knew every draw, every blind approach, every variable. And she knew the Barrett was still up there, still zeroed, still capable. Just no one left to use it. One by one, the proposed solutions came and failed. Call for artillery. Too close to friendlies. Send. In a replacement team, fastest QRF is 40 minutes out. Convoys in the kill zone in 20. Evac the sniper team. We lose Overwatch. Convoy walks into an ambush blind. Every answer ended in a dead end. Frida's throat was dry, but her voice came out clear. Not loud, not rushed. Sir. Morrison didn't even turn. Doc, I'll get you casualty updates as soon as we have. Them. Stand by. Sir, she repeated. I'm not asking about casualties. Now he turned, that same look confused, irritated, dismissive. I'm volunteering to take over the Barrett. The room went silent. It wasn't shock that filled the space. It was rejection, instant, instinctive, complete. Faces turned toward her like she'd just spoken in tongues. She saw it in Morrison's eyes. Pity, frustration, disbelief. Lundgren, you're a medic. This isn't the time for delusions. We need solutions. I am a solution, she said softly. He stepped toward her, lowering his voice. This isn't some training scenario. That's live fire, enemy contact. If we send you in, I've studied the Barrett system for months. Ballistics, wind drift, scope mechanics, I know the ranges. The sight picture, the drop curves. Chun stepped forward now, protective. Doc, we know you've been studying, but this isn't the range. This is war. You miss one shot, just one, and people die. Her jaw was tight, eyes locked on Morrison. They'll die if no one shoots at all. A beat passed. 2. The weight of her words pressed into the room. Still, Morrison shook his head. Absolutely not. You are not authorized. I need qualified operators on weapons. This isn't your job. Then who is? She said, her voice rising not loud, but unshakable. Who's closer? Who's ready? Who can get to that position in 10 minutes, knows the ridge, and can make the shot? No one answered, because they all knew the answer. No one could, and she was already moving. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait to be called back. The moment Morrison turned back to the tactical screen, she walked out of the operations center and into the burning sun. Her heart was a war drum. She had 10 minutes. Her quarters were 2 minutes away. She moved like fire, quick, fluid, focused. Inside her footlocker were the tools of a woman everyone had misunderstood. She had a field radio modified to patch into the team's encrypted net, acquired over months of quiet favors and borrowed parts. She had medical gear that doubled as tactical support IFA case with combat tourniquets and pressure. Syringes, compact enough to fit into a shooter's loadout, and beneath the medical gauze and morphine, the range cards, the ballistic charts, her precision scope calculator, and body armor lighter than standard issue, custom fitted. No one had ever asked why she'd requested it. No one thought a medic might need to move under fire. She left. Short note on her bunk. Not goodbye. Just explanation. Then she was gone. Out into the desert heat, into the mission they'd already declared unwinnable. Her vehicle wasn't military. Not by designation, but it was fast. She drove hard, bouncing over uneven sand roads she'd memorized from maps, tuning her radio to the tactical net. Position deteriorating, Williams still conscious. Sniper position compromised. 7 minutes out, she killed the engine. The rest she'd do on foot, gear strapped tight. Rifle she wasn't supposed to have slung across her back. Eyes locked on the ridgeline. No backup, no sanction, only the mathematics. Convoy in 14 minutes. Overwatch in collapse. She was the only line left. She moved like she was made for this. Terrain memorized, angles calculated. Her body was a machine now driven by purpose, unburdened by doubt. She wasn't allowed to be here. She wasn't trained, certified, or qualified, but she was ready. As she reached the slope leading up to the ridge, gunfire snapped through the VO. Air close now. Too close. The observation post was under direct fire. She keyed her radio. Viper 6, this is Doc, approaching your position from the southeast, carrying med gear and support capabilities. Doc? Negative, do not approach. We're under fire. Repeat, do not. I'm already here. She cut in. Cover me if you can. Seconds later, she broke over the ridge and into the smoke. Bullets sang in the wind. Williams was down. One arm drenched in blood. Peterson, the spotter, flinched. When he saw her, she dropped to her knees beside Williams, applying pressure. Eyes already scanning the Barrett. It was still there. Scope zeroed, ammunition prepped. The tool was ready. It just needed a hand. Peterson stared. Doc, are you out of your mind? Frida looked him dead in the eye. Do you want Overwatch or do you want to pray? He blinked, then nodded. She slung the rifle around, settled in behind the scope like it was muscle memory, because it was, range 800 meters. Peterson muttered, enemy sniper in a dug-in position, covering the convoy route. Frida steadied her breath, slowed her pulse. Her finger found the trigger, and in that moment, every whispered lesson, every hidden hour on the range, every discarded doubt came home. The Barrett kicked against her shoulder with a thunderous crack. Through the scope, she saw the target fall, dead before he hit the ground. There was no time to celebrate. Next target, 2 o'clock, 900 meters. Machine gun nest. She adjusted, breathed, fired, hit. Target down. Peterson stared at her like he didn't recognize her, because they hadn't. Not until now. Third target, moving between cover. She tracked the movement, anticipated the break, fired, confirmed. 3 shots, 3 kills. And then Morrison's voice crackled over the net. Base to Viper 6. Report status of medical personnel who left base unauthorized. Peterson said nothing. Frida didn't even flinch, because the world could argue about orders later right now. The convoy was 5 minutes from the kill zone, and she was the only reason it still had a chance. She wasn't supposed to be here, not behind the Barrett, not in a sniper hide under active fire, not holding the lives of an entire convoy in her hands. And yet here she was. 3 confirmed targets, 1 wounded teammate stabilized beside her. Another operator behind her, still trying to process what he was watching. Frida didn't look away from the scope. She couldn't afford to. Next, she said. Peterson, crouched to her right, thumbed his field glasses with shaking fingers. Movement, 10 o'clock, range 750. They're smart, using cover, rotating positions. Could be command personnel. She already saw them. A staggered patrol pushing along the rock ledge, trying to flank. Their silhouettes flicked in and out of view through desert heat shimmer. 1, 2, 3. They thought they were ghosts. She made them real. Her breath was silent. One hand cradled the buttstock. The other pressed the trigger like a pianist resting. Her fingers on ivory. The 4th shot broke across the ridge like thunder. Target down. Frida exhaled slow. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of her training. Her father's voice echoed from somewhere in memory. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. The radio crackled. Convoy entering danger zone in 90 seconds, Peterson said, voice rising. Enemy positioning 2 clicks east. Secondary fire teams moving to intercept. Williams stirred beside them, his face pale but alert. Doc, save your strength, she said, sliding another round into the chamber. No, he whispered. You don't get to be called Doc anymore. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't smile. Not now, not yet. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. She shifted the scope to the second flank. The enemy had adapted. Smoke was blooming across the kill zone, burning tires. Quick fires, artificial cover. They were trying to deny visibility, but Frida had practiced this too. She remembered shooting through fog back in Sweden. Rain in Denmark, sandstorms in simulation. Now it was smoke. No problem. Peterson scanned with binoculars. Machine gunner on the move, 12 o'clock, full sprint, dragging support ammo, trying to set up before the convoy crests. Range? About 1,000, wind east-northeast, maybe 6 knots. Frida didn't hesitate. She adjusted windage, found the arc, breathed, slowed her pulse, visualized the hit point through the smoke trail. Squeeze, boom. The runner dropped mid-stride. Rolling down the slope, Peterson let out a sound half disbelief, half awe. Are you even real? No answer. Just chambered the next round. The convoy was now 45 seconds from entering the hot zone. On the radio, a sharp voice came through. Viper 6. This is convoy lead. We are committed. Are we covered? Peterson hit his transmitter. You're covered. Viper Overwatch is active and effective. Another voice chimed in familiar. Furious Morrison. Viper 6. This is base. Confirm identity of Overwatch sniper. Repeat. Who is on that rifle? Frida said nothing. Peterson looked at her. She didn't flinch, sir. Peterson said over the net. Respectfully. Mission is underway. We'll debrief later. Silence followed. But Morrison didn't cut the channel. He was still listening. Of course he was. Frida kept working. Her hands moved with a calm defiance, the kind forged in silence. Under years of being overlooked, of being almost seen, she wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't even trying to prove anything. She was just doing what no one else could. And in 20 more seconds, it would matter more than ever. Convoy is cresting. The ridge, Peterson warned. Multiple eyes watching them. Enemy snipers repositioning. We've got about 30 degrees of sightline. Can you cover it? Frida didn't answer. She was already scanning 1, 2, 3 far edge movement. Sniper, upper ridge, perfect elevation. She adjusted. This one wasn't standing still. He was good. He shifted between rock and cover like water. Most shooters would have. Missed him entirely. Peterson hadn't even seen him yet. But Frida had studied movement patterns for months. She recognized the rhythm. 2 seconds visible. 1 second hidden. Repeat. She locked in, waited, counted. 1, 2. Squeeze. The Barrett's recoil slammed into her shoulder like a wave, but her shot didn't waver. Through the scope, she saw the enemy sniper collapse backwards over the ridge. 20 seconds later, the convoy rolled into the zone and nothing happened. No bullets, no ambush, just silence. She kept watching. Peterson was speaking into the comms, confirming safe passage, relaying coordinates, but Frida tuned it all out. Her world was the scope, the wind, the shape of movement on sand. Only when the final vehicle passed through did she lean back. Her fingers ached. Her shoulders screamed from the recoil. Her jaw was clenched so tight it felt fused. But she didn't care because they were safe, every last one of them. Williams groaned softly. Frida turned back to him, already moving to check his vitals. The blood loss had slowed. Her makeshift dressing had held. You're going to make it, she said. He blinked. Only 'cause you're crazy. Peterson dropped beside them. Radio still live, convoy clear, he confirmed. No friendly casualties. Overwatch disengaging. Then, softer, into the private channel. You just rewrote the rulebook. Doc, but she shook her head. I didn't rewrite it. I ignored it. The radio came to life again, this time. Morrison's voice sharp and tight. Viper 6, this is base. You will return with the next evac bird. Specialist Lundgren is to be escorted immediately to my office. Do you understand? Peterson looked at her. What do we say? Frida stood slowly, collecting her gear, the barrel of the Barrett still warm against her shoulder. We say I did my job, she murmured. No pride, no regret, just truth. Because in the end, she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't asking for recognition. She was asking for results, and she delivered them. No matter what came next, and something told her what came next would test her even more than today ever had. What does it cost to be right when being right means breaking every rule they gave you? The helicopter blades carved the desert silence like a blade through canvas. Dust swirled as the evac bird dropped fast onto the ridge. Frida stood ready. Barrett secured across her back, medical gear repacked, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. She hadn't spoken since the last shot. She didn't need to. The results spoke louder than anything she could say. 12 confirmed targets. No friendly casualties. 1 wounded operator stabilized. 1 convoy fully protected through a kill zone that should have become a graveyard. And yet, the moment the chopper door opened, she wasn't greeted with applause. Just protocol. 2 MPs stepped out first. No words, just silent escorts. Peterson helped Williams into the cabin. And Frida followed with no resistance. She knew what this was. She wasn't being flown back for congratulations. She was being flown back for judgment. Inside the helicopter, no one spoke. Williams gave her a quiet nod, his blood-soaked sleeve stiff. Across his arm, his eyes said what no one else dared. You saved us, all of us, but no one else dared to meet her eyes. Not Peterson, not the reinforcements who had arrived too late. Frida sat perfectly still, her mind already running through everything she'd done. Every decision, every round, every radio call, every moment she had acted without authorization. And succeeded anyway. It wasn't pride she felt. It was the cold weight of knowing she had done what was necessary, and that the people in charge would see only the how, not the why. They always did. The base reappeared below in the rising sun haze. As golden dust hung in the air, familiar, unwelcoming, as the chopper touched down, she saw them waiting Morrison. 2 base officials, a third in a suit intel, maybe, all standing with clipped expressions and squared shoulders. She stepped out, feeling the weight of every eye on her. The sound of her boots on the tarmac was loud enough to echo through her chest. Morrison's face was unreadable, but his voice cut through the dry air. Specialist Lundgren, my office now. She followed without a word. Inside, the room was dim. The blinds were half drawn. A glass of untouched water sat sweating on the desk between them. Her file thicker now lay open, red-stamped documents spilling from its edges. Morrison didn't offer her a seat, but she took one anyway, because she wasn't here to beg. Let me be very clear, he began, his voice calm. Controlled, dangerous. You disobeyed direct orders. You left base unauthorized. You conducted combat operations outside your scope. You operated a weapon system you were not qualified to use. Do you dispute any of this? Frida met his eyes. No, sir. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Her voice was quiet, but it never wavered. I did what needed to be done. A muscle moved in his jaw. You don't get to decide that. No one else did. He stared at her. The silence between them grew heavy, thick with unspoken truths. Outside, a transport truck rumbled by, the low vibration settling into the floor beneath her boots. Finally, he sat back in his chair. I read the after-action reports. 12 confirmed kills. No friendly casualties. The convoy made it through clean. 1 wounded. Stabilized on site. Frida said nothing. That's a better outcome than any model predicted. He admitted, almost bitterly, she waited for the but, and it came. But that doesn't make you right. That makes you lucky. You crossed the line. Lundgren. You set a precedent that could unravel everything we build our teams around: structure, role integrity, trusting command. You made a decision based on emotion. No, she said, her voice sharpened by restraint. I made a decision based on preparation. I didn't hope I could make those shots. I knew I could. Morrison stood, pacing now, his boots leaving invisible trails of frustration across the floor. You're a medic, a damn good one. That's why I wanted you here, not to play sniper, not to rewrite combat doctrine because you got tired of sitting at the back of the room. Frida stood too, because sitting felt like surrender. I didn't rewrite anything, sir. I didn't take anything from anyone. I didn't try to become something I'm not. But when the call came and there was no one else to answer it, I answered. Not because I wanted to, because I could. And you know what? Terrifies people. When someone does what you said was impossible and makes it look easy. He stared at her. For a long time, something behind his eyes softened, then hardened again. You're grounded. Effective immediately, range privileges revoked, tactical access suspended. All pending training requests denied. You'll continue your medical duties until further notice. Frida nodded once. She expected worse. Morrison's voice lowered. There's an investigation underway. Higher command will decide if you're reprimanded, reassigned, or discharged. Until then, keep your head down and pray your results speak louder than your rebellion. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. You said something earlier that I don't get to decide, but someone had to, and I'm glad it was me. He didn't respond. He just stared at the window. Behind her, the door clicked shut. Back in her quarters, the silence was deafening. No. Teammates knocked. No congratulations, no welcome back. The whispers were louder now. She could feel them in the way eyes slid away when she passed. In the quiet between sentences when she entered a room, she was no longer just a medic. She was the one who broke the system, and no one knew what to do with that. That night, alone, she removed the letter she'd written months ago from under her mattress. If something happens to me, it won't be because I failed. It'll be because they weren't ready for me to succeed. She folded it back, not because she needed it anymore, but because it was already coming true. Her hands trembled not from doubt, but from the weight of knowing she might never get another chance like that again. And if she didn't, she would carry that truth alone, because no one celebrates the woman who saves lives with a weapon she wasn't allowed to touch. They question her. They fear her. They try to make sure it never happens again. But Frida knew something now. Something uncheckable. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you dangerous. Why did it feel like she was being erased right after she'd proven she belonged? Days passed. Quiet ones. Too quiet. No more alarms. No more emergencies. Just the dry buzz of the desert wind and the low thrum of generators humming through the base. And Frida walked through it all like a ghost. They didn't say anything to her directly. They didn't have to. Her access to the range? Revoked. Her tactical channel login locked out. Even her medical requests, simple things like new compression bandages or advanced trauma gear, were delayed, questioned, sometimes denied. The system was pushing her back into her box. She was back to being Doc, and this time, with silence instead of respect. She should have expected it, but somehow, it still cut deeper than any wound she'd treated in the field. The men she'd bled for, shot for, saved avoided her eyes in the mess hall. Peterson offered a stiff nod and nothing more. Williams had been medevaced to Germany. The one man who'd called her the reason we're still alive was now 2,000 miles away, and his voice had been the only one that mattered. The rest? Their silence told her everything. She'd made them uncomfortable. She'd shown them that the line between roles wasn't as permanent as they believed, and worse. She'd done it well. There were no medals, no ceremony, just a formal acknowledgement in the mission log. One paragraph, clinical, detached. Convoy support mission, completed with 0 friendly casualties. Unconventional sniper support provided from Overwatch position. Subject, Specialist F. Lundgren. Unauthorized participation. Under review. No mention of the kill count. No mention of the fact she'd stabilized Williams with one hand while firing with the other. Just under review. She wasn't angry, she was tired. That night, she found herself walking the perimeter wall as the sun bled into the horizon. The sky was bruised with purple and gold. A rifle wasn't slung across her shoulder this time. Just her med pack. The same one she always carried, except now it felt heavier than ever. She found Martinez near the far fence, oiling a sidearm under a lamp. The former ranger gave her a quick glance, then looked back at the weapon. "You're not supposed to be here." Frida crossed her arms. "Figured. I'm not supposed to be anywhere anymore." A long silence stretched between them. He didn't look at her when he spoke again. "You broke the rhythm that scares people more than anything." She sat down across from him on the concrete, her boots dusted red from the day's wind. "I didn't break it," she said. "I just heard a different beat." Martinez grunted. "Still broke it." More silence. Then he reached into his footlocker and pulled out a small, cloth-wrapped item. Set it between them. "Found this in the range logbook. Last one you signed out." She unwrapped it slowly. It was the scope she'd trained with. The same one she'd learned windage on. The same one she'd memorized drop rates with. It felt heavier now. Not physically, historically. "I didn't want to make trouble," she said softly. "You didn't," Martinez replied. "You made a difference. And they hate that it came from the wrong place." "The wrong place," she repeated. "A medic, a woman." A voice from the back of the room. He nodded, then finally looked her in the eye. "You embarrassed them." "Frida, that's the problem." She didn't answer, because deep down she knew it was true. But she hadn't meant to embarrass anyone. She'd meant to help. She'd meant to save lives. Wasn't that the point? Wasn't that the mission? Do no harm. Save who you can. She returned to her quarters after midnight, the scope still in her hand. She didn't put it back in the footlocker. She left it out, resting on the corner of her desk, not as defiance, as reminder. The next morning, a summons came, not from Morrison, from higher up, a colonel. She arrived at the command building. Shoulders square, hair tied back, boots polished, every detail flawless. Inside the air-conditioned briefing room sat 3 officers. One was older, eyes sharp behind wire-frame glasses. One was younger, clearly legal or intelligence. The third didn't speak, just watched. The colonel didn't waste time. "You violated protocol," he said, flatly, "but your actions led to mission success. No emotion, no tone, just the facts. You demonstrated tactical proficiency with an unauthorized weapon system while simultaneously conducting medical care under enemy fire. We've reviewed the helmet cam footage, the audio, and the radio logs." Frida waited, calm, prepared. But her pulse betrayed her. "You've put command in a difficult position. Specialist, if we punish you harshly, it sends the wrong message to everyone who may one day act outside the box to save lives. But if we commend you, it encourages others to think they're above command structures." Still, she didn't speak. The colonel studied her for a long moment. Then, "We're not here to decide your fate today. We're here to ask a question." Frida raised her chin. "Sir, what would you do if it happened again?" She answered without pause. "I'd do it again, every time. No fear, no bluff, just truth." The colonel looked at the others, nodded once. "You're not being discharged. Not yet. Your record remains under review, but you'll be reassigned to a non-combat base until this settles." And just like that, her war was over. At least here, they weren't punishing her, but they were moving her out of sight, off the map, because the system couldn't hold her anymore. And it didn't want to admit it. As she left the building, sun pouring back over her shoulders, she understood something. She hadn't been erased. She'd become inconvenient, and inconvenient people didn't get punished. They got transferred, quietly, neatly, safely. But the truth? The truth was still alive, carved into that ridge, etched into every shot fired. And no one, not Command, not Morrison, not the entire damn rulebook, could change that. She wasn't just a medic anymore. She never had been. They just hadn't seen it. But now they would never forget. What do you do when they move you out of the war? But the war doesn't leave you. The flight to the new base was short, nondescript, no briefing, no ceremony. Just a transport bird and a sealed envelope with reassignment orders stamped in dull ink. Medical liaison, logistics support, Sector Echo 9. Echo 9 wasn't the war zone. It wasn't even close, a low-priority supply hub tucked between mountains and scrubland. It had 2 helipads, 3 Quonset huts, and enough barbed wire to make you wonder what anyone expected to happen there. Which was the point. They'd sent Frida somewhere they wouldn't have to look at her, where no one asked questions, where her presence wouldn't disturb the balance. She stepped off the transport into a thin breeze in silence. No welcoming officers, no escort, just a clipboard hanging on a gatepost with her name scribbled under Housing Unit B4. She found it without trouble. The bunk was clean, bare, a standard issue. Cot, a desk, a small window facing the east perimeter, and a footlocker with her new badge code. No photos, no letters. They hadn't even forwarded her gear, except the medkit and the scope. That she'd carried herself. By the second day, she'd figured out the rhythm of Echo 9. There wasn't one. No. Drills, no live fire, no convoys, just endless crates, routine rotations, and a dozen enlisted soldiers cycling through monotonous tasks like a machine trying to forget it once had a soul. Most of them didn't know who she was. A few did. Word had traveled fractured, diluted, warped. The story became whispers in the mess hall. She picked up a sniper rifle and fired off into the wind like some damn movie. I heard she disobeyed orders and got someone killed, but command covered it. They say she was never even trained. Just got lucky. Frida didn't correct any of them. She didn't speak much at all. She just worked. Cleaned medical gear. Filed supply. Reports, maintained first aid caches with robotic precision. Each night, she returned to the barracks and sat at the edge of the cot, staring at the unopened scope case, waiting for something. She didn't know what until the knock came. It was late, close to midnight. 3 sharp taps. She opened the door to find a man she didn't recognize. Tall, lean, with desert-worn eyes and a uniform that lacked any identifying marks. Specialist. Lundgren? She nodded. He handed her a folder. Your record came across my desk. I think we need to talk. She glanced down at the folder. No rank, no division. Just a symbol, simple and obscure. Not standard command. Who are you? He tilted his head slightly. Let's call it an invitation. To what? He paused, watching her closely. To something that doesn't fit into the neat categories of medic or marksman. Something that needs people who don't ask permission. When lives are on the line, her pulse kicked. You saw the footage. We saw more than that, he said. We saw judgment, patience, clarity under pressure, and a willingness to carry the weight afterward. She crossed her arms. They transferred me out here to bury that story. He nodded, and we dug it up. The wind outside whispered along the tin roof. What happens if I say no? Then we thank you for your service, he said calmly, and leave you here to bandage sprains until the end of your rotation. And if I say yes? A small smile. You learn who you really are. She didn't respond right away, but her eyes drifted toward the scope case sitting on the desk behind her. He followed her gaze. You kept it. I earned it. He nodded once, firmly. Then maybe it's time you used it again. She opened the folder. Inside, coordinates, briefs, psychological profiles, advanced training protocols. No names. No. Units and 1 photo. A satellite image of a terrain ridge. Different continent. Same problem. An Overwatch post. Under threat. Operators missing. Her breath caught. Another sniper position? He didn't answer directly, just said, "You won't be sent. You'll be chosen if you want it. No pressure. No promise. Just a door. One she could walk through or leave closed." That night, she stared at the scope again. Only now, it wasn't. Wait. It was purpose. She remembered the silence before the first shot. The calm, the certainty, not adrenaline, alignment. A medic who had spent years being overlooked. A woman trained in everything except permission. A soul that refused to fit the mold. And maybe that was the point. She wasn't a rule breaker. She was a gap filler, a last resort, a necessary contradiction by morning. Her response was written on a scrap of paper and folded inside the folder. 4 words. Send me the coordinates. No bravado, no grand speech. Just truth. Because she hadn't come this far just to be quiet again. She'd bled to earn a voice, and now? Now it was time to use it. Why did it feel more like coming home? When she was walking into the unknown? They didn't send another transport. They didn't send orders through official channels. They sent coordinates encrypted, exact, time-stamped to the second. She was told to bring nothing but her medkit, her sidearm, and what felt necessary. She brought the scope, and that was all. When she reached the rendezvous point, an abandoned checkpoint carved into the cliffside of a defunct supply route, 2 men waited, not in uniform, not smiling. One drove a black utility vehicle without tags. The other opened the rear door, silent. No words, just a gesture. She got in. They drove for hours, no music, no chatter, just terrain unfolding in silence. Dust swallowed the windows. Somewhere behind her, the base at Echo 9 was already forgetting she'd been there. Eventually, the desert gave way to a canyon path, narrow and half-eaten by erosion. They climbed for a long time, tires crunching rock. When the vehicle stopped, she saw it, a compound tucked into the cliff wall, hidden in shadow. 3 buildings, no lights. Satellite shielding panels stretched above, like wings, and around it, silence thick enough to bury questions. Inside, everything was precise, clean, cold. A woman met her at the door, black flight suit, no rank, eyes that didn't blink unnecessarily. "You're early," she said. "I thought I was late." "You neither. You're on time." Frida followed without hesitation, down a narrow corridor, past bolted doors, into a room with no windows, only screens. Mission feeds, satellite relays, combat logs. A single chair sat in the center. The woman motioned to it. "Sit, watch." Frida obeyed. The screen lit up. Footage played, grainy helmet cam video. Night vision washed in green. A team moving through. Low brush, whispered comes, then panic. Contact left. Sniper. Static, screams, radio distortion. Frida leaned forward, jaw tightening. A ridge, an Overwatch nest. Enemy position triangulating with suppressed fire. The team below scrambling, pinned, and then nothing. No Overwatch? Frida asked. No. The woman answered. The sniper missed the first shot, panicked, froze. What happened to the team? 4 Kia, 2 captured. The footage cut, black screen, silence. Frida sat back, her pulse steady, her breath quiet. "You watched the wrong person," she murmured. The woman arched a brow. "Explain." "You trained someone to hit targets, not to carry consequences." The silence between them sharpened like glass. "Then, that's why you're here." Frida looked around. "This isn't an assignment, is it?" "No, it's a replacement." Frida's eyes narrowed. "Whose?" The woman's voice dropped. "Yours." She let the words settle before continuing. "You're not being asked to fill a role. You're being asked to become something else. Not a sniper, not a medic, something in between. Something outside the command chain. Quiet, surgical, morally unbound. When Overwatch fails, when support vanishes, you arrive." Frida thought for a long time. What's the catch? No medals, no names. No one knows you exist unless you fail. And if I fail? We replace you. Simple, cold, honest. Frida leaned forward, elbows on knees. And if I don't? Then someone lives who was supposed to die. That night. They gave her a cot in a room without a window, no lock, no watch. They trusted she wouldn't leave. Because deep down, they knew this was exactly where she needed to be. Not because she wanted glory, because this was her redemption. For the years she sat silent, for the shots she never took, for the versions of herself she buried under titles like medic or specialist. She wasn't angry anymore. She was ready. They tested her for days, marksmanship under fatigue, tactical trauma care under simulated gunfire, zeroing scopes with shaking hands, target acquisition after zero sleep. She passed every test, not perfectly, but calmly, and that unnerved them more than excellence. Because calm was rare, calm was earned, and Frida had bled for hers. In the final evaluation, they handed her a single bullet. She was told nothing, no file, no target, just a long-range rifle and one shot across a canyon. What am I hitting? She asked. The woman in the flight suit only said, "You'll know," and walked away. Frida studied the horizon, felt the wind, waited. 32 minutes later, a distant figure emerged. Holding a rifle, wearing no insignia, the target walked up. Line across the canyon rim, deliberate, intentional. It was a test. Another shooter. Frida steadied the rifle, lined up the reticle, waited. The other shooter turned slightly, a gleam off a scope. She exhaled slowly. Then she adjusted off target. Just by inches fired. The round hit the dirt near the figure's boot, kicking dust and stopping them cold. Across the canyon, the figure raised their hands in slow respect. Not because Frida missed, but because she'd chosen not to hit. Behind her, the woman in the flight suit appeared once more. No shot. No threat. You sure? I watched their feet, their hands, their gait. That wasn't an assassin. It was a mirror. The woman nodded and walked away. Frida looked back through the scope. The figure on the other side was gone. But her place? Her place had just been claimed, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel out of place. She felt real. What do you call someone who never asked to be a hero, but became the reason others lived? Frida stood at the edge of the overlook as morning mist curled over the cliffs like breath held in the hands of the earth. Below, a canyon stretched wide and endless, scattered with stones, brush, silence. Somewhere out there, her next mission would begin. She didn't know when or how, she only knew. They would call when it mattered. That was the deal. She hadn't signed a contract. She hadn't saluted or sworn again. She had simply said yes, because sometimes that's all it takes. The compound behind her was still asleep. No blaring alarms. No drills. No fake urgency. Just a hum of possibility, the kind that waited. Still and quiet, until the world needed something unusual. She was now a part of a unit with no name. No patch, no confirmed location. She wasn't on any official roster. If she died, there would be no ceremony, no folded flag, just a closed file and a whispered acknowledgement in some deep hallway of the Defense Department. And still, this was the most seen she had ever felt. Not celebrated, not elevated, just understood. She returned to her room bare, except for the cot, a locked drawer, and the scope that had followed her like a second spine. She wiped it down in silence. The metal no longer gleamed. It was worn in all the right places. Familiar, honest, just like her. The first mission came 2 days later, a whisper across a secure line. Overwatch compromised. Last asset dead. 3 civilians. 1 operative, 1 hostage. Coordinates, weather data. Threat analysis. No name, no backup. Just one phrase at the bottom of the file. You are the last call. They flew her in at night low. Fast, silent, no team, no guide. She rappelled into the black with nothing but her kit, her rifle, and her will. She landed on the ridge 30 minutes before the breach and waited calm, not because she wanted to be a killer, but because someone had to be the one who stopped the killing. The first shot came at dawn. Clean, measured, necessary. By the time the team on the ground reached the hostage, 5 enemy combatants were down. No civilians harmed, no chaos, no trace of who had protected them. Just one round casing, still warm. Left on a rock, that became her mark. Not initials, not blood, just a subtle reminder. Someone was watching. The missions continued, not every week. Sometimes months passed in silence, but the calls came, always sudden, always precise. And she answered them all. In the chaos of the world, there were always places where plans unraveled, where the unexpected cracked through protocol like a fault line, where everything came down to one moment, one decision, one person with the courage to act. That's where Frida lived now, between orders, between shadows. And slowly, quietly, the myth grew. Operators whispered of a ghost overwatch, a medic turned marksman, someone who saw when no one else could, who stayed silent, struck only when necessary, then vanished. Some said she didn't exist. Some said she was a I, but the few who knew the truth, they carried it like a vow. Because in a world that trained soldiers to fall, Frida had become someone who answered. One night, back at the compound, she received a package, no name. Inside, a small metal, scratched, burned along the edge, and a note written in uneven handwriting. Your shot saved my daughter. Thank you. She didn't cry. She didn't even sit. She simply folded the note and placed it inside her scope case next to her original reassignment papers, because that one message outweighed everything she'd ever been denied. Recognition wasn't the goal. Impact was, and as long as she was needed, she would show up, not because they said she could, but because she knew she must. They had once tried to reduce her to a role, a medic, a helper, a ghost in the background. But ghosts have purpose too. They move unseen through the chaos, leaving behind safety, clarity, and quiet strength. And in the shadows of conflict, in the moments where silence could mean death, Frida had become something else entirely. Not a hero, not a legend, just a promise that no one would be left behind again, not if she could help it. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.